Hello and welcome to Ask Housing. I'm Jammu Ghosh, editor-in-chief Housing.com news, and we're in conversation today with Arvind Subramanian, who's the CEO of Mahindra Happinest. Arvind, great to have you on the show.
Wonderful to speak to you.
Yes. So we are sort of hoping to understand the evolution of affordable housing in the last few years, especially in the last decade. So I'll start with the home buyer. Would it be fair to say that the home buyer today, his aspirations are something that he's not compromising on? He doesn't want to compromise on the kind of amenities or living experience that he expects from a builder just because he's buying an affordable house. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think, look, historically, the buyer in this segment has been asked to make three very gut-wrenching compromises. One, he's given a product which is very far away from where he works. Two, it is always smaller than what he actually needs. And three, the quality tends to be very poor from a fits and finishes perspective. I think there's been some progress on all these three fronts. And certainly, as you said, the buyer is not willing to make these compromises, which is why they choose not to buy. They choose to stay in, continue to live in poor quality accommodation on rent or parents' accommodation, etc., because they're being asked to make these compromises. If I were to take each of these, I think certainly with large developers, the branded developers coming into this segment of the market, quality has improved by leaps and bounds. So with most of the branded and particularly the corporate developers like a Mahindra, because there's a corporate brand name associated with it, you cannot do anything to detract from that corporate brand, and therefore you assure a certain quality of final product. I think the sizes and kind of how they can be used are also starting to be, there's some creativity starting to emerge on that front. Closeness of the product to or the home to the workplace is still a challenge, and it's something that is work in process. I don't think the industry has solved for that yet.
Yeah. Why do you think that we're not able to solve that? Is it just the cost of land issue, or do you think maybe there are other factors at play?
Yeah, I'm often asked what is the biggest challenge facing the affordable housing sector, or how will you grow this business? How will you get cheap land? And yes, cheap land is a problem, particularly in large metros. Trying to find land which is accessible yet affordable is a bottleneck. But to my mind, that is not the biggest bottleneck. I think one of the bigger issues that we are facing is how quickly can you convert that land into a product which is ready for launch and a product that is completed. Yeah. As we've all come to learn, time is the biggest lever of economics in this business. If I'm able to bring a land to market within 12 months of buying that land versus taking 3 years to bring that product to market, that's already a 25% difference in cost of land. So as we evaluate land now, we are willing to pay a little bit more if we believe this land can be brought to market sooner, either because it already has approvals, or we believe approvals can be got pretty quickly, or that market is ready to absorb that demand. So those are criteria we look at.
Yeah. So what other challenges, does the segment face? Because like you said, it has been an evolution, literally an evolution. What are the other challenges, that the sector has had to grapple with?
I think the biggest challenge, which we don't talk about enough, is the lack of imagination. The lack of imagination and the lack of innovation. Yeah. We are still building the same kind of homes in the same way that we built them 40 years back. Yeah. If I were to think back at the home I grew up in as a child 45 years ago, and what we are building today, it's eerie how similar the homes are in terms of layout. Yet the families that occupy these homes have changed in terms of the structure, what they want, and what they want from the space. I'll give you a very simple example which stares us in the face. Today, media consumption, we all know, no longer happens on the large television screen. Most of it has moved to the mobile screen in the privacy of a room. Yet our layouts have the television taking pride of place in the living room. And that is a compromise of space, because that space could be used for something else. We are all working within a very tight space. So to dedicate something to a use which most of the family no longer needs is, to my mind, a travesty.
Yeah, but so this is, these are all market dynamics, right? But from a government support or a government policy point of view, is there something that comes to mind? Is anything a challenge from that?
Yeah, I would say three things. One, speed of approvals. Like I mentioned earlier, time is the key driver of economics. If, particularly for affordable housing, there could be a mode to get a fast track approval, I think that would be wonderful. It would really make this business get a second wind. The second is some kind of assurance around basic infrastructure. When I set up an affordable housing project, can I be guaranteed that I will get a water connection, that I will get a sewerage line connection, that electricity will be at the doorstep, that piped gas would be available, which today has become a very important necessity. So can the government, the local government, assure the supply of those utilities within a time-bound manner? The third is public transport. While we can't bring affordable housing to the central business district, we can reduce the commute time. We can make the commute much more comfortable. I think the investment that's happening in all the cities around the metro networks is going to be a game changer. We are underestimating the power that simple large investment has in terms of just changing land use and land economy in these cities.
Yeah. So, okay, these are the challenges. Now, what about maybe enablers? The one thing that a lot of people have been talking about is the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. What, in your opinion, has been the impact of that policy in terms of just encouraging people to buy more affordable homes? Are you seeing a kind of perceptible difference or change there? How would you rate?
I think the impact has been very significant.
Okay.
And let me just pick three areas which I would single out as kind of standard bearers of the impact. The first is simply by creating this program, Housing for All, and the PMAY programs that back it. This government has raised the visibility of this as a problem, and it's raised our consciousness. It's brought it into the daily conversation, both for us as developers, as on the supply side, but more importantly for these customers who I think over the last 2 or 3 decades had reconciled themselves to the fact that we may never be able to buy a home in our lives. But today they are all feeling that this is within grasp. They can aspire to it. It's a legitimate demand that they have. That, to my mind, is very, very important. The second is on the, you mentioned about credit-linked subsidies, etc. I think it's helped make this segment of customers expand their affordability. We are seeing in our developments profiles of customers who you typically wouldn't expect to be able to stretch to buy these homes are actually now buying these homes because of the credit-linked subsidy and the associated innovation that's happened in the mortgage companies around assessing credit risk for informally employed customers, for example. And the third is just a tremendous push on the supply side. Over 85 lakh homes have been sanctioned under the PPP models, which is a very, very major dent into solving this problem. And from what we hear from recent statements made by the ministry, they expect to be addressing the 1 million home shortage before time, so before 2022.
So, my last question to you is about due diligence. So, I think we can't deny the fact that this remains a largely unorganized sector. There are a lot of duplicitous players as well. A lot of home buyers have been cheated by these players. So, as an expert, could you give our home buyers some tips so that they can ensure that they are investing in the right project and in the right developer? What kind of research should they be doing?
I think this is a great question, and it's a particularly complex problem in housing. If you compare any other large ticket size purchase that these consumers make, those purchases tend to be very parameterized. You buy a car, you look at mileage, you look at engine power, you look at boot space, you look at wheelbase. There are ways to evaluate the product in that category and to be able to compare it with competing products. In housing, unfortunately, that language has not developed. So we are still behind the curve on that. And to my mind, it is a solvable problem. RERA has done some good work, yeoman work in this area by insisting that carpet area must be disclosed and the erstwhile sellable area is out of the window, which was a figment of imagination. But even within carpet area, there is still a lot of room for sharper definitions. So how much of usable space is there within that carpet area? How much is lost in passages? How much is lost in walls? Those are things that are not apparent at first glance to a customer. So I would say if I were to advise a home buyer in this segment who's putting his life saving and not just historical saving but future earning as well into buying this house, number one would be credibility of delivery. Look, you cannot be taking a risk with that kind of a purchase saying, I hope this home is completed. And with the number of distressed projects that exist, that to me, above everything else, is a go-no-go decision. So the fact that the developer has a track record of delivering, you are 100% confident that this home will get delivered in the promised time frame is filter number one. Then on the second level, I would say evaluating the product in terms of usability, in terms of how it fits your needs in terms of commute to work, in terms of social infrastructure, access to schools for your children, access to healthcare. Those are, to my mind, the second level of product understanding. The third would then be price and availability of credit. And I would keep these sequential, because very often the price decision overshadows the first two decisions, and you start making decisions which you regret.
True. Thank you so much for your inputs, Arvind. Well, that's all that we have time for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do keep track of us on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.